Hello everybody, welcome along to the Event Industry News podcast. My name's James Dickson, wishing you a very good morning, afternoon or evening to all of our podcast followers whenever or wherever you are tuning into this episode from. Today's podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Engage, powered by D2I Systems, winner of Best Event Management Platform at the 2017 Event Technology Awards. To learn how Engage can make your business more profitable, visit d2isystems.com/engage. Welcome along to today's episode, and welcome to not one but two guests on today's show. First of all, we welcome James Rees. James is the Executive Director for Conferences and Events at ExCel's London and CentrEd at ExCel's. James, thanks very much for joining the podcast.
Hi James, and thanks for the invitation. Great to be here.
Not a problem at all. And we also welcome Zaynab Zubair. Zaynab is the business partner for digital workplace at Arriva, the major player in the UK transport sector and industry. Zaynab, thanks very much for joining the podcast today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all. On today's show, we're going to be talking about, I suppose, one of the most common things that crops up in the events industry, which is the relationship between client and venue. James, as I mentioned, works for ExCel. Zaynab works for Arriva, and Arriva as an organisation utilise the spaces that James represents for meetings and various different types of events, and we're going to be learning a little bit about both sides of that relationship and why in particular this venue works for the client. James, I'm going to come to you first of all. ExCel as a space and as a brand will be known by pretty much everybody listening to today's podcast. Most of them will likely have been in the space. They will know it for these vast, clear span exhibition halls that you have available there, perhaps less so for the CentrEd at ExCel brand. Tell us exactly what that is and what it offers clients.
Well, really good question, James. And as you rightly say, ExCel's known for big exhibitions, big conventions. We've got our huge halls, our international convention centre. But in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen increasing volumes of inquiries for organisers such as Zaynab's saying, look, we think ExCel's the right part of the country or the right part of London to hold our event. Mm-hmm. You've got loads of big spaces. Have you got any small meeting rooms that can do maybe 10, 20, 100, 200 delegates in an intimate setting? And those inquiries were becoming more and more prevalent. So we thought, how can we look to satisfy that demand? And we took a series of rooms called the South Gallery rooms. Mm-hmm. I'm sat in up on this balcony level here, right now, overlooking the historic Royal Docks, looking over towards the Thames Barrier. So a great setting. And we had this series of rooms, but we were lacking the delegate niceties, if you like, the expectations of delegates coming to a venue where you have a private entrance, lounge areas, free-flowing coffee and tea from machines that you can grab and go. All those where normally you could expect a hotel or a smaller venue provider to have such facilities. Sure, so yeah. We basically built what was missing, and it was about $1 million and a quarter of investment in creating 2 brand new lounges, all those catering niceties, a new restaurant, etc. And it's really opened up now these rooms, which were relatively underutilised, mm-hmm. To organisers of smaller meetings. So that opened in 2016, and we feel we're going from strength to strength with that, if you like, venue within a venue.
And of course, it's not uncommon for major convention centres and exhibition centres to have breakout rooms, to have meeting rooms. But as you rightly pointed out, these meeting rooms have been there for a long, long time. These spaces, by the sounds of things, were always there and part of the building, but underutilised. And perhaps it's right that a brand, if you could call it that, was created to represent them in their own right, to perhaps separate them from what people understand it, for the most part, ExCel to be.
Absolutely spot on. And we took professional advice from across the industry, as well as from some specialist brand agencies to say, right, this is what we're looking to do. Here's the competition. And there's some great competition across London and elsewhere in the UK. What do you think we should do? And that's how we ended up with CentrEd. And we've been really pleased in the take-up. One of the key things that organisations such as Zaynab's wanted from us was to come to ExCel, to run their meeting, but to know price-wise what they were paying and what they were getting for their money. So the idea of having a daily delegate rate where you confirm 100 delegates and that's the price per delegate, no added extras, nothing, no hidden surprises, was really attractive. And so that's where we've been succeeding. And the upside of that for us has been some corporations coming into ExCel, using us for the first time, and actually then looking to build, to bring a bigger event, a sort of an AGM or a bigger staff engagement event, which then uses the spaces you referred to earlier on in our convention centre and big halls. So actually it's been quite a nice sort of feeder to our original core business.
Sure. And at that point, it will come to you, Zaynab, and welcome you to the show. James mentioned there that working with clients like Arriva and being able to offer them these from a budget point of view, a very, very clear, transparent way of utilising a venue like this. When did Arriva first utilise the CentrEd at ExCel facility, and why was it selected?
Thanks, James. Well, we had our first event in September of last year.
Okay.
And this was basically a technology conference. We'd had some business change and we wanted a place that we could all come together. Arriva is not just in the UK, it's in 14 different countries across Europe, and we have heads of IT based across Europe. So it was really, where can we find a place that we can bring everyone together? And, you know, being in London, there is a perception of a lot of money being spent to do something like this. So one of the challenges that I was posed with was, do it, but don't look pretentious while you're doing it, you know? So obviously we did the usual evaluation of places in central London. We're based in Holborn, but then I actually live in the Docklands area. So that sort of inside knowledge, I can see the ExCel from my balcony. And I was just having coffee one day going, where am I going to find a place? And I saw the ExCel and I thought, I know it's big, I know they have really big events here, but it's worth just checking what they can do, because the first conference was going to be about, I think we had about 200 people. So although I know that you do cater for much smaller groups as well, I needed something that could scale, but also keep everyone together, because what I didn't want to do is be organizing dinner in one place and lunch in one place and calling a catering company and trying to do drinks in the evening. It was just too much for me to do all of that, and I just wanted one place where I could keep everyone together. And I think, you know, James mentioned the day delegate rate, which was perfect, because you know, it's not my core role to be doing events, and I think especially for people like myself who want to throw events for your teams, it is quite useful to have one place that does it all for you. You deal with one person, and actually I think they thought about more things than I was even thinking about. So we looked elsewhere in London, and the criteria that really helped with this was the fact that, I think mainly because the hotel, the airport is there, plus you've got the ExCel catering to the bigger events. We had plenty of hotel facilities. We were bringing people across the UK, but also, as I mentioned, Europe. So we needed to have hotel facilities, and just having London hotels itself are prohibitive. So I think that's one of the allures of the area. If you're looking for a space that already has the infrastructure around it, you've got the hotels, you've got the restaurants within the ExCel as well. You've got fantastic views if it's a nice day, and it's a different feel around there. Do you know what I mean? You don't feel like you're in London. It feels almost like you're on holiday, because you've got the boats and you've got the water. So eventually it was really about the cost, but also about having a space that could do everything we needed it to do without having to go to 6 different places to organize hotels and to organize dinner and lunch and everything.
And I suppose on that point, James, there wouldn't be 1 second where I should suggest that there would be any complacency with a smaller event, but with the experience of dealing with vast, big exhibitions and conventions that utilize the large spaces that you have at ExCel, were you in a strong position then when you're offering CentrEd to clients looking for smaller meeting and event spaces, that with the experience of dealing with vast, large events, you're able to then quite easily translate that and work with companies really, really effectively on delivering smaller events as well?
I think Zaynab put it really well in the fact that, yes, as you rightly described, there is an ExCel machine, if you like, that's been building up both its facilities but also its connections with with local businesses, with hotels, with transport providers, etc. So we've got everything any event organizer needs, either on campus or within a matter of minutes of the site here. But what we have done, we didn't want to in any way apply the big ExCel model onto CentrEd. This is very much a unit on its own. It has its own management team, its own delivery staff. So right. They are, whilst they pull in all the knowledge of the whole company, of the whole site, they are a smaller, more intimate team for what is a smaller, more intimate space. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing I would reflect on is that, as Zaynab said, we're close to the water. There's very little traffic here. One of the key things when we were planning this, and the consultants that we were seeking advice from were saying, this is such a great place for people to come and meet and learn and sort of open their minds, get out of the office, come to a meeting, and actually the ability to look out over the water and have that sense of the natural elements of air, water. They're south facing, so English weather permitting, lots of sunshine. And I'm biased because I work here and I'm here all the time, but it is fantastic. It's so good, and people do come here and leave having taken themselves out of their normal, everyday life, and you're not you're not stuck in London, sort of looking out the window at the shops or whatever and being distracted. It's a great place to come and for organisers to deliver a message or deliver a training regime, etc. Organisers find it really beneficial.
And prior to the creation of CentrEd, which, as you pointed out, took place in 2016, and that investment that went into enhancing the facilities that were already there, I remember visiting those particular meeting rooms, the South Galleries, I think you said they used to be referred
That's right.
to, in late 2014, and having been in and out of ExCel on many, many occasions for exhibitions and for trade shows, that was the first time that I had experienced those particular rooms. And my first thought was not, wow, look at the tech that they've got in here, or look at the AV systems, or what great catering. My first thought was, isn't it nice to have a meeting room with windows and a view, actual natural daylight, as opposed 100%. To a lot of these claustrophobic meeting rooms that you get in a lot of these sort of quite clinical, sterile facilities. And I suppose if you're looking to have a successful meeting, first and foremost, you've got to put people into an atmosphere that's conducive to positive thinking, to a relaxed environment. And regardless of what the technical support was and the infrastructure that they've got there, Zaynab, you were nodding there quite sort of vigorously when I suggested about the atmosphere. Was the view and the natural daylight, was that a big part of it?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I am biased because I live in the area and I think it's fantastic. But when I was given this responsibility, I went to so many hotels and meeting conference facilities, and you go in, it's a room, you don't see anything, it's all walls. If you're lucky, you may see something, but it was just completely a different, atmosphere, because you would have people You go to a hotel and look at their facilities for 200 people. It is literally what they used to have weddings or conferences, but it doesn't differentiate itself. There's no USP. Whereas this was, I did see so many people sort of looking out the window and just contemplating and thinking and absorbing. And there is something to be said for that. And when we had our coffee breaks, they weren't sitting in a room, or they weren't sort of standing around and there was no natural daylight. They could go out, they could stand outside and talk. And there was just that environment. And what we did as well was we had a professional photographer. And as part of this, we said, if you wanted to get your LinkedIn pictures or your Office 365 profile pictures done, this is perfect lighting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it outside. So all of us have pictures now with the background of the Thames, and it's fantastic.
When it came to actually planning the content and the critical sort of part of the event, Zaynab, you mentioned about the support that was available and the infrastructure that was available from the team at CentrEd. And you mentioned also that you don't have necessarily an events background and experience in doing that. So what were you able to source directly from the venue by way of support? And that could be anything from planning the timing of the actual sessions to things like the AV support, the technical support, what type of catering to put on?
Yeah, I think, as James said, when you do throw massive events, there will be someone whose job is dedicated to doing this, and they would have done this several times. Whereas for me, I wanted someone to sort of not hold my hand, but definitely say, have you thought about these things? And I think that was one of the great things that we got from there. It was from the beginning, you went in, you had sort of a site recce, you'd go and you'd look at the space and try to understand what you want to do with it. But the great thing was the audio was part of the center, so I didn't have to go out and hire a technician. The food was provided from the center. So having those I think those are the two big things, because you don't want the AV to go wrong, because that will technical support is the biggest nightmare when it comes to conferences. So you wanted someone who knows the space, and I think that's a real key selling point, because sometimes you get AV technicians from outside, they don't know where the plug sockets are in half these places. Yeah. So it was really good to have, I think it was Rachel who helped me to say, don't worry, he knows everything. And to be fair, in the end, he pretty much ran the whole show for us when it came to the AV side of things. So that was fantastic. And I could really focus on ensuring that our leaders and our management were comfortable, and then they were getting ready for their presentations and speeches. So that was really useful. And the food as well, again, you go outside and try to source it from other people. Sometimes it gets a bit sort of, but when do they come? What time do they come? Can they start early? Can they start late? Everything just happens seamlessly, the coffee and tea. And whenever we needed something extra, more tables, or we needed anything from tape to scissors, it was just there for us. And I think that was a real selling point.
James, something that Zaynab pointed out there, and something that I often reference, is that event organisers can often get bogged down in the really, really sort of detailed, complicated side of things, that they are sometimes guilty of overlooking simple things like, where are the plug sockets? Where are you actually going to put stuff in? And having a venue where there are not just local knowledge, but house technicians, house support, people who know and understand the venue inside out and back to front, which even in the best hotel meeting venues you don't necessarily get. When you were going through the rebrand, through the redevelopment of the facility, was that something that was a big part of the overall plan? Was not just to upgrade the facilities, but actually have the personnel with the right training and the right expertise?
Yeah, 100%. And I think I mentioned it just earlier. We deliberately decided we wouldn't use the regular operations and event management teams who are dealing with the big events that we host. We needed a small, more a boutique style, if you like, way of supporting our organisers. Everything ExCel does, whether it's a big event, a small event, or something in between, our sort of a whole raison d'etre as an organisation is to deliver the absolute best event outcomes for our guests. And our guests are our organisers, our delegates, our exhibitors. Anyone that visits our venue is our guest. Because if people leave the venue having had a great experience, they will they'll be our ambassadors and tell other people ExCel's a great place to go for an event. And I think if organisers can worry about as few small things as possible, so I think it's our job to make sure we think about all the practicalities and take those worries away from the organiser. The organiser then can really channel her or his efforts into making sure the content and the logistics and those elements of their event is absolutely the best it can be. Because if they concentrate on that part and we do our job, then organisers, their delegates, their speakers will all leave having had a great experience, and that's the only way we'll ever continue to grow and build our business.
When it came to identifying the right space for you, Zaynab, were there a few different options that you looked at, or was it pretty obvious on your first site visit to the venue that that particular space there was the right one for you? Or how did you go about establishing which particular room as such was right for you?
Well, I think for me, it was more about the overall venue. What happened was we went in and I said I needed a space for 200 people. So I think they actually opened up 2 rooms for us.
Right.
And I think having the flexibility to make it as small or as big as you want is great, because we didn't go in and say, oh yeah, we'll have this room. They asked us, okay, how many people are you looking at? And then they made the room the size that we wanted it to fit it.
I see.
And we wanted a bit of breakout space. We wanted all of that facility. So I guess it was less about going, yeah, this is the space. It was more about going, this is what we want. And then it was catered to, which was great. So if I wanted to have a much smaller event, we're thinking of just doing the top 30, 40, 50 managers, then I know that actually it's not about the space. I know that they can cater for it and change the configuration of the room to suit us. And it was also, having the flexibility to have the breakout sessions, to have a reception, and have a dedicated space for our people to take a break, to take a few phone calls, to do a few emails, to get coffee and tea as and when they please. That really, I think, really made the difference.
And so often, James, again, just looking at what you may call traditional meeting venues, so often the events are adapted to fit the venue, and there's a compromise there where the event is tailored because that is the space and that's what you can do with it. It sounds to me like this is more of an approach of being able to tailor the venue to suit the event.
I agree, and I think actually everywhere you go in ExCel, that's one of our USPs. We can scale up or down. As Zaynab there said, we can go for small numbers, or if a client wants to grow. So up here in CentrEd, we can squeeze up to 400 in the largest of the plenary rooms. Mm-hmm. But again, with movable walls, that can scale down. We also we have a relatively bland decor, if I can put it that way, which means we're not clashing with companies, logo colours. We're not a blue venue which might prohibit Shell. We're not or BP as a green logo or something like that. So we can, but we can, because of the flexibility of the space, we can personalise. We can add colour. You can certainly add colour in venues like this, but it's difficult to take colour away, of course.
That's an interesting point to make there, because you're quite right, but it's not something that will perhaps be at the top of the list when you're when you're looking at something like that. And as soon as you mention it, though, I bet there are hundreds of our listeners who've just heard what you said and gone, that's a very good point. The companies have such a strong brand identity. Arriva will have a very, very strong brand. They will have brand guidelines. They will have a lot of work and development that's gone into creating their logos, their colors, their identity. And then when you put them into a space and you do put them against a wall that is a complete clash of color, it doesn't stand out like you want it to stand out, does it, Zaynab?
Yeah, exactly. I think having almost a blank canvas, first of all, you don't need to decorate because you've got that amazing view there, and I think that speaks for itself. But yeah, having a blank canvas really helps. And I think more and more spaces that I'm seeing in London are going for that sort of minimalistic view so that people can dress it the way they want. For us, because we were a technology function, we wanted to do less print and paper. We wanted it to be all digital. So we had a screen so that the back wall of the room was projected with sort of a running feed of social media. We had cocktail tables that had sort of digital iPads on them, and keeping that space sort of progressive and light and free means that we don't feel like we're in a 1980s conference room. Do you know what I mean? It really gave us that freedom to be digital and have the branding and have the marketing the way we wanted it.
On that note, James, just going back and referencing the development and the investment that went into creating CentrEd out of the spaces that used to be there, what was the technology infrastructure or new technology infrastructure that went into it during that creation period? Given what Zaynab was just saying about having a digital conference and many conferences going paperless, they will want good Wi-Fi. They will perhaps want separation of networks for production or for certain meeting rooms. They will perhaps want, a Cat5 network as well to connect actual, hardwired cable connections to. How much thinking went into that, and how much investment went into that particular aspect of it?
Another really good question, and spot on. We had to. The rooms are already reasonably well catered for, but what we did need to do was have the ability for rooms to be able to patch from one to another wherever the client wanted the linkage. So that was the big upgrade. I can't give you a figure. The overall investment was £1.25 million, as I mentioned earlier, but the biggest chunk of that was a couple of brand new lifts that we installed to make sure clients were able to get up and down quickly to the other catering areas. But a lot went into the patchability, if you like, particularly because we installed sound and projection into each of the rooms, and that the sound in particular, the ability to have a room, so the largest of the rooms can go from 4 rooms into 1. So you need to be able to patch any combination of those and have them all linked in. So that was the major infrastructure cost. And then we've also a whole load of new screens in all the lounges, so we can push out content or logos or whatever the client wants. So a pretty chunky sum. I can't give you the exact number, but we did have to finesse what we already had.
But certainly giving it the ability. And Zaynab, when you went in there, did you find that work had paid off? If you wanted to utilize a screen to put a logo on, or if you wanted to just say, oh, could we utilize that? It all sounds like it was relatively easy to deliver that.
Yeah, absolutely. There were screens at the entrance. There were screens in the lobbies. We used it not just for marketing, but also when people come. It is a massive conference center. They were able to go, okay, yes, I've seen my brand. It's on that screen. We put messaging up on there as well. One of the things we were really keen to do, like I said, one of our principles was this is going to be as paper-free as possible. So we had games that quizzes that we were running, and we needed to make sure the Wi-Fi would be able to sustain 200 people playing Kahoots at one time. And I can say it was fine. It all worked perfectly. So definitely you can see the reflection in the investment in technology.
And as we progress towards the end of today's episode, I was quite keen to ask you both about future developments. James, I'll come to you first of all. 2016 was when CentrEd was opened and unveiled as a brand and a facility in its own right, as a venue within a venue. That's 2 years ago. How have things progressed in those 2 years, and what are the plans going forward to continue the evolution of the space?
Well, we, as you rightly say, we launched in 2016. We hit our first year's sort of targeted number of events and revenues. We grew last year. We grew about 20%, but this year actually we're going to double what we did last year. So it's it's really taken off. And I think what we'll find now is, from a future investment point of view, we'll be absolutely making sure we stay at leading edge on technology, always a driver for higher bandwidth, etc. on IT. So we're right at the forefront of that. And I think we'd be one of the things I think, and again, I speak from a biased standpoint, but ExCel is very good wherever it is in the venue, both in the main venue and here in CentrEd, in reinvesting capital expenditure every year to make sure we're, freshly decorated, that the carpets are clean. The one thing annoys me if I do go to other venues, if you see sort of stains on carpets or chips out of walls, etc. So we're hot on that, and I think really maintaining great quality blank canvas facilities here is what our clients are looking for. But we'll always listen and invest further when clients have certain demands.
And finally, to you, Zaynab, you mentioned earlier on in today's episode that the first event for Arriva was held last year at CentrEd. Are there plans already to go back there? Is this something that Arriva want to make a regular part of their ongoing development as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, it was a change in the business, and we wanted to do a first sort of see how it goes. And I think because it went quite successfully, we did a survey afterwards to understand the facilities, to understand the day, because we did it over 2 days. There was a half day, and then the next day was another half day. So, and whether that format worked, it's become so fundamentally important now for the role that they're actually giving that to the internal comms person to now run with it and say, right, this is now something we want to do going on and moving forward. They're skipping it this year because of financial pressures, and also again, this was an interim function. But they're looking to have a new event within the next quarter, so watch this space.
Excellent. And for you, James, I suppose it's a bit of a loaded question, but to finish off, is it nice working in the capacity that you do to see a company that have dipped their toe in the water, if you will, and tried an event for the first time, and to hear feedback like that, knowing that the venue itself and the support that you gave them probably contributed quite fundamentally to the success of that event, and that a company is now looking to actually build and put that in as a regular part of their portfolio as a result of the work that you've done?
Well, I would thank Zaynab for her very kind words earlier in the podcast, and I'm glad that I'm really glad our team sort of met expectations. But it's not for us to take the glory. I think the importance is that, and the reason I know that we believe the Arriva event was such a success was that Zaynab and her team were absolutely clear on what their outcomes they wanted to be. So it actually made our job very easy. We knew exactly what they were trying to achieve. Therefore, we could flex our resources to help support that. And I think it's always a joy when an organizer knows exactly what they want, knows in their mind, tells us, we don't mind people being blunt and saying, I want this, 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 this. It's a lot easier if people have a clear path and a clear vision, and then it's our job to support that and make, as I said, great event outcomes.
Wise words indeed, and take heed, any event organisers listening into today's podcast. Clear, concise direction and briefs to your event venue will allow them to deliver exactly what it is that you need. Our guests today on the podcast have been Zaynab Zubair. Zaynab is the business partner for Digital Workplace on behalf of Arriva Transport, and James Rees, Executive Director for Conferences and Events from ExCel, and specifically today centred at ExCel, which is what we've been talking about as a venue. Thank you to you both for joining the podcast today. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
To everybody tuning in, the podcast is brought to you by our sponsor, Engage, powered by D2I Systems, winner of Best Event Management Platform at the 2017 Event Technology Awards. To learn how Engage can make your business more profitable, visit d2isystems.com eventindustry.com/engage. And don't forget to stay up to date with all of the latest news, content and features from eventindustrynews.com. You can also get any thoughts and opinions to us via Twitter using the hashtag @eventnewsblog. And you can also follow us on all of the other various social media platforms. Thanks very much to both of our guests once again for today. Don't forget that the podcast goes out once a week, and on the last Wednesday of each month, we broadcast a live episode via the Event Industry News Facebook page. So be sure to tune into that. For the time being, it's time to end today's episode. Thanks very much for listening. My name's James Dickson, and we'll see you on the next episode of the podcast. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.